3 seconds later, like there was a flickering lamplight. One was too close for comfort, it had drawn long broad blades now silently, ready to kill. James zigzagged between apparitions towards the castle until something eerie told him to look back. A piercing will, a fire-red-colored banshee-looking, nay reaper-looking wide tattered and torn came floating towards him with a reaper's scythe. Its hood was empty and harrowing, floating 1 meter above ground with no legs nor robes covering them. This infernal presence froze James strangely in place for 5 seconds, he tried desperately to move but couldn't do it like in a fever dream. His instincts were on fire, he couldn't fight this. It was like looking down a red abyss into deepest hell. He ran towards the castle intently, coming up towards the door he smashed the lock and went in, shutting hopefully. There was a spiral staircase and a door, he decided upwards. Most banshees wouldn't go into the castle, and those that shifted in didn't go up the stairs.
Oh, 1.2 million.
And the spirit from Ultra Hell, another plane could not be defeated. A single orc assaulted him, coming up into a corridor. James was barely fast enough to avoid the primitive axe. He was brown with brown armor and a small shield. He trashed the orc through the wall and out the castle mercilessly. He met a meek, long and tall orc with glasses thus. "What are you doing so far up here?" said the orc hostile and concerned. "How did you fight the 300 werewolves?" "I didn't, there's the treasure in it." The castle had less dangerous rooms and more far between, like a bonus area or an unfinished expansion. He met more black elves but they seemed to tolerate his presence, like an evil man tolerates new ideas. He came across an agility room, he dodged scythes and saw blades from the wall, pulled in his stomach between blades, did acrobatics. There was a huge water wheel he had to run upwards, it required all of his speed and more than he thought. Running like a muscle boss he only advanced so quickly until he was at the diagonal top and exit. He found a chest, it opened into a platina diamond silver key. "You have found the key that unlocks every chest in the castle," said the wizard voice like telling a story, with an exception of allowance. It will only get better from here, James thought. Not far away, in a few rooms James unlocked a seriously burly chest and found the Staff of the Sun, looking like bird-inspired, like a totem and like a whack of gold. He remembered from Oswald thus, to merge the Sun Staff and the Dock Staff would turn into something as valuable as something from the Dragon's treasure room. In a final room there was a giant minotaur, 4 horns with a crown, dark fiery eyes with a giant 2-handed sword, broad and jagged. Behind him was an opulent door of gold and finesse that could only be the treasure room of this instance. Well done getting past the werewolf's cur, this is the final challenge of this place. But not the dragon, Mr. Bull? Nay, wait. Is there to be someone else here, are you just on reserve duty? I want to fight Kerr, no more talking. The Minotaur blew fire from his nostrils and went for a double spin with the sword and then a quick overhead. The Minotaur assaulted right, overhead, left, right overhead, left, right, leaving no time for retaliation. James dodged an overhead and uppercut the Minotaur into the air. The sword got stuck in the ground for a second and James smashed it into 3 pieces with impact grip. The half-sword was good enough for the Minotaur, they swung sword for sword, clashing like titans in ever-measuring strength. They clashed a final time swords and fists, their strength was even, though James was smaller. The Minotaur headbutted with his horn like it was his third arm. James got hit and it made him angry. With impact magic he headbutted back, knocking the Minotaur into the floor, flipping down and hitting his head first. Another fiery swing from James destroyed the remainder of his sword and lit his bull hands on fire. Consider I have semester tomorrow, the Minotaur said in a deep voice. I don't even want to work for this guy. All this stuff about evil, decay and sickness cord. In semester you will find you are beat. James grabbed him by the horns and with the power of elf steroids. Steroid meteor. Jumped and knocked him out with the ground. He punched the door beyond, it wouldn't budge. It seemed to need a key into a giant golden hole that was probably here in the castle. He used fire magic to melt the lock mechanism, it seemed to resist him, but after 2 minutes of expert fire skills the door was hinging mildly. There was a gold view of treasure, swords of gold and silver and bronze, magical weapons, 4 giant diamonds and 3 onyxes, bars of mithril and adamant, restoration potions and restorative magical ale. He recognized a mimic in the middle of the room, he would not screw around with it. He carried the most valuable stuff he thought in his giant backpack, which was as large as him now. It was different, but he would get used to the weight as usual. He drank some magically balanced Odin's Ravens, beer, making him feel grand, also by the very light taste almost like cider. Beer really tastes something special if you wait a long time in between. A long time for James was 2 days. He went past the Minotaur and the staircase, out to the courtyard onto the castle. The apparitions were fewer and the Red Reaper was missing, they seemed sluggish as he went to his hole down and balanced the sack on his head. Down he went like a missile, his muscular legs crunched the ground, making cracks eventually in a wide stance. The air was easier to breathe here, like an easier level. Looks like the party had painted magical arrows where they had gone, it was just 3 rooms. For the 3rd time he went to find his party. Christ almighty, said Lois. They were in another ranged-only skeleton room, hitting the targets and dodging javelins. You're as greedy as my aunt, said Osgiliath. James told them a bit about his adventure. Look James, why don't you teleport with our loot so far to the London base, then teleport back to Charred Woods? James got even more to carry. Put a shroud like of invisibility around me and Sid, so no one bats an eye. James smashed a vial and was once again pulled through colors and space to London. He went to the tavern base feeling funny. He felt there would be disagreements later, so he told no one about and hid the diamonds. He took 3 minutes just resting his buttocks on a chair and boots on a table, not thinking much and enjoying resting. It was all he needed. Oh look, another beer. He didn't realize he came into a frequency of peace, healing and wisdom he's been looking for, and when he was back in the castle after teleporting he was indeed sharper. His magical ability had increased his healing. James liked experimenting with aerobic brain-derived neurotropic factor training, keeping his heart rate as high as possible because the more blood his brain got as he was exercising aerobically, the smarter he got. James had gotten several IQ points smarter by being able to figure out how to get smarter. Dreamy. There was also a mushroom that looked like a lion's mane, curcumin and piperin, and more brain blood through ginkgo tree leaves. These still grew, some like weeds, some common and homely, some frequent in another country. That's it. He would teleport to these countries with the prize money and buy locally, or pick. Maybe this is the time to start learning teleportation. He also suspected plants that increased learning speed also made you smarter permanently, like Spanish sage, sikianda, 3 types of ginseng, rosenroot and ashwagandha. That which you eat daily makes you smarter, like it's permanent as well, like Indian long pepper.
That's right, 15
He wasn't interested,
dragons.
he was intellectually eccentric. Food tore through his burning anvil of a brain as he remembered the way through the castle. James, said Oswald, mimicking the British. We could ask you to teleport out again. They were in a fiery coal, purple and teal crystal and magma room. This heavy shrine won't open unless we're outside of the castle, could be troll gold. I can just carry it in my backpack, said James, or I can teleport just to Charred Woods and open it there. James in his resource-saving mode, permanent solutions over temporary, which he usually was. It isn't that far back here really, and we save a London teleport. Oswald put his palm close to the shrine, closed his eyes and said psychically, troll gold. James, who wasn't a bad psychic or spiritualist, also put his palm forth and felt deceit, falsehood, smelly and trolls over gold like foot fungus over steak. James had sides of spirituality, calm, wisdom and peace, but they were introverted and not often seen. The mathematical introvert scientific planning and analysis side isn't seen in the ENTP, just like the unique magical moral world of inner feeling or any introvert side is. Many personalities thinks others, opposites aren't necessary and make no sense, can be ignored or superfluous. But balancing out your opposite, cognitive function, gives you wisdom and peace, like being a meditator. Like engaging in all 5 senses in the now, digging hands in dirt for the thinker. Teleport out. James opened the shrine easily after being outside in the insipid fog or hallucinating darkness, part of the evil just like the inside. The huge shrine revealed, troll gold, made out of bloodbark and clay. Smelled like bad meat or good cheese, but also 1 diamond bracelet glimmering and 2 diamond rings that had 4 gold bridges leading to the diamond. Maybe we should use some of these for wear, he thought richly, and practiced his rich man's laughter, ha ha ha. It was troll gold. ACHH we. Except the diamonds, James protruded like it was nothing. Diamonds makes everyone react the same way. Jensen, could you teach me how to magically find rare mental boosting herbs and roots? Have you turned to natural medicine, lad? That's expensive. If you promise to pick Spanish sage for me, I'll teach you Rouge's inner sight. It will highlight your roots. Jensen and James did highlighting magic to each other over and over while the party was chatting. Just Cole in this room now, let's move on. Next was the depression room. It looked like a theater preparation room. There were masks they were supposed to look into, carnival and theater masks with long noses and a dagger underneath, but would go through a metal you could rest your head. This is the depression room, said the wizard voice. Hold on to your will to live. Look through the masks to pass. The party sat down throughout the booths like actors ready to put on their suicide last theater. 1 step closer to the edge, said wizard voice. James felt tired and his senses went to like dreaming, spirals of depression touching as he went through. They made him feel gloomy, and as ever the confidence was leaving him, the dagger grew nearer. The spirals were filled with his horrible childhood and a cold-blooded family. They rejected him as shadows cloth like the reaper. Their eyes were white holes large as frying pans. You're not behaving good enough. Weak grades. Can't you do better? Why do you slouch? You have no friends. Not smart enough. But at not smart enough he realized they were wrong. You're not as smart as you think, he always had been. They were just phantoms, always punching downwards. He was doing good. He was out of their league. He was only strong now. If this test had come a few years earlier it would have spoke trouble. Then came the promises of relief through death of his darkness and past, nothing heard in the Trans-Europe train ride endless. Death greets you warm for your troubles, I would just be reincarnated worse, he thought cleverly. It would be relief, came the feelings and thoughts intrusive, the power could be felt like a menacing spirit and weakening legs, but then it didn't become stronger. James exited into normal perceptions. His head hurt and he felt ravaged, but his friends were standing around brushing their throats. It started penetrating James, said Porpoise, I was so scared. Thunk, the dagger went through Clement's throat and out the other side of the neck, he made some twitching. Your religious friend is a fearful coward and feelings poorly organized, said the wizard voice. As the body was drawn into a bloody exploding chute, the next door opened. Unbelievable. The next door was the dragon's treasure chamber. Indeed, it was a giant room of Greek columns, hollow rooms on coin and see-through elevation, mostly piles of gold everywhere, sea of gold, gems except emerald, diamond chainmail, mithril armor, adamant scimitars. Some weapons were too gemmed to use efficiently and made out of weak gold material. Maybe several rooms led into this giant room. Crowns and tiaras were magical. Cups had gold of plenty, so did horns filled with diamonds. We made it thus. This room is fair, just pick the things that doesn't wake the dragon. Teleport out carrying as much as you can, that is the brilliant meta. The dragon has never been defeated, James, said Raphael. Like the other ancient metal-infused dragons, it's immune to many schools of magic. Yensid, make us as magically light and soundless if you can. Yensid was proud over him. And so they went in different directions, tiptoeing. James looked over a crown, pouring gold over as he inspected. It hid a diamond skull. He also took a barrel opulent chest with a giant golden outlaid keyhole. He thought to sell the chest as well as its contents. Probably a teleporting global access chest. Jade and sapphire and beryl figurines. Flawless rubies the size of heads, uncut onyx triple blacker than black. They went on and carefully like the wise, they had their packs and pockets half full. Crash. Another 10 members of the party broke through the roof and landed on the dragon with rubble. Enter the dragon room, a voice said. The dragon opened its yellow 4 eyes with 8 irises, slowly got up and snorted fire for 3 seconds. The powerful snorting stunned everyone, overpowered for the duration they noticed. They started attacking and axing the dragon, the other party. 2 attacks went through its hide and it magically spun, knocking everyone off with a sphere of magic too. The party intelligently started filling their bags with anything nearby and then teleporting out. Like an alien, the dragon jumped 10 meters in a second, crunched the ground, ate or sucked their adventurers. The dragon gathered power, gleaming, and regurgitated a skeleton with a sphere traveling slowly, shooting javelins, lightning and ice barrage. The spell was too powerful for them, blinding. The dragon got hit as it gathered power, fire inside its mouth. Their fates told them of your potential death. It spewed a small implosion fireball, traveling slowly. Massive explosion. 4 party members got completely engulfed by the fireball, disappearing in 1 second. Then the implosion pulled everyone outside in, still hot. Yensid blinded and confused the dragon as best he could, teleporting around, but the dragon used counter magic unknown to them, locking Yensid in magical shackles. He teleported out. You won't stop fighting, biting, piercing, feisty. The dragon voice was raspier when it said, if you don't stop I will blast burn. Raphael fought the dragon with divine vengeance spells, a worthy opponent, but the dragon beat him and kept him busy with his thick, armored tail. An angry fiery stomp of the dragon sent fire magic second quick throughout their party, melting their armor with degrees told them superior. James blocked and thought 3 seconds before throwing 2 rebound, warhammers and axe. The dragon seemed immune to impact magic. James filled his backpack hungrily but panicky, grabbed his arm's length with weapons glorious and opulent. As the mithril dragon spewed blue flames over him, he teleported out. He was teleported next to Yensid and Porpoise at London Gates. Hoo-hoo, I can't believe we did that, yeah. We got treasure despite a party crash, said Porpoise negatively, but analyzingly correct. The dragon is awake for 3 days when it is awoken, said Yensid. On to the tavern, said James. Raphael came through a holy blue gate behind them. Raphael, stay here and we'll come back and pick up the stuff on the ground. In the tavern base, Porpoise, Seth. Let's go to a tavern in London, James, and buy their most expensive stuff, something I've always wanted to do. And a 5-star hotel, and we shall drink and ravage the penthouse. What do you say to fetching Eugene? There are parties around her like triangulated. In the morrow.
Alright, I want us to play some music now. No, actually, let's do this.
Aurons, and there his lieutenant shall dwell, not Saruman,
These evil monologues.
but one more worthy of trust. Looking in the messenger's eyes, they read his thought. He was to be that lieutenant, and gather all that remained of the West under his sway. He would be their tyrant, and they
Twitch
his
is gonna
slaves.
stop watching, right? But I'm out of the risk. It's so cool.
But Gandalf said, "This is much to demand for the delivery of one servant,
You get double
that your master should
then they go away.
receive in exchange what he must else fight many a war to gain. Or has the field of Gondor destroyed his hope in war, so that he falls to haggling? And if Indeed, we rated this prisoner so high. What surety have we that Sauron, the base master of treachery, will keep his part? Where is this prisoner? Let him be brought forth and yielded to us, and then we will consider these demands. It seemed then to Gandalf, intent, watching him as a man engaged in fencing with a deadly foe, that for the taking of a breath, the messenger was at a loss. Yet swiftly he laughed again. Do not bandy words in your insolence with the mouth of Sauron, he cried. Surety you crave.
Let me get some coffee.
Sauron gave none. If you sue for his clemency, you must first do his bidding. These are his terms. Take them or leave them. These we will take, said Gandalf. Suddenly, he cast aside his cloak, and a white light shone forth like a sword in that black place. Before his upraised hand, the foul messenger recoiled, and Gandalf, coming, seized and took from him the tokens, coat, cloak, and sword. These we will take in memory of our friend, he cried. But as for your terms, we reject them utterly. Get you gone. For your embassy is over and death is near to you. We did not come here to waste words entreating with Sauron, faithless and accursed. Still less with one of his slaves. Begone! Then the messenger of Mordor laughed no more. His face was twisted with amazement and anger to the likeness of some wild beast that, as it crouches on its prey, is smitten on the muzzle with a stinging rod. Rage filled him, and his mouth slavered, and shapeless sounds of fury came strangling from his throat. But he looked at the fell faces of the captains and their deadly eyes, and fear overcame his wrath. He gave a great cry and turned, leapt upon his steed, and with his company he galloped madly back to Cirith Gorgor. But as they went, his soldiers blew their horns in signal long arranged. And even before they came to the gate, Sauron sprang his trap. Drums rolled and fires leapt up. The great doors of the Black Gate swung back wide. Out of it streamed a great host, as swiftly as swirling waters when a sluice is lifted. The captains mounted again and rode back, and from the host of Mordor there went up a jeering yell. Dust rose, smothering the air as from nearby there marched up an army of Easterlings that had waited for the signal in the shadows of Ered Lithui beyond the further tower. Down from the hills on either side of the Morannon poured orcs innumerable. The men of the west were trapped, and soon all about the great
Oops.
mounds where they stood, forced.
So we'll listen to this as well.
If you
before the
sue
rest
for
of
his
them.
clemency, you must first do his bidding. These are his terms. Take them or leave them. These we will take, said Gandalf suddenly. He cast aside his cloak, and a white light shone forth like a sword in that black place. Before his upraised hand, the foul messenger recoiled, and Gandalf, coming, seized and took from him the tokens, coat, cloak, and sword. These we will take in memory of our friend, he cried. But as for your terms, we reject them utterly. Get you gone. For your embassy is over and death is near to you. We did not come here to waste words entreating with Sauron, faithless and accursed. Still less with one of his slaves. Begone! Then the messenger of Mordor laughed no more. His face was twisted with amazement and anger to the likeness of some wild beast that, as it crouches on its prey, is smitten on the muzzle with a stinging rod. Rage filled him, and his mouth slavered, and shapeless sounds of fury came strangling from his throat. But he looked at the fell faces of the captains and their deadly eyes, and fear overcame his wrath. He gave a great cry and turned, leapt upon his steed, and with his company galloped madly back to Cirith Gorgor. But as they went, his soldiers blew their horns in signal long arranged. And even before they came to the gate, Sauron sprang his trap. Drums rolled and fires leapt up. The great doors of the Black Gate swung back wide. Out of it streamed a great host, as swiftly as swirling waters when a sluice is lifted. The captains mounted again and rode back, and from the host of Mordor there went up a jeering yell. Dust rose, smothering the air, as from nearby there marched up an army of Easterlings that had waited for the signal in the shadows of Ered Lithui beyond the further tower. Down from the hills on either side of the Morannon poured orcs innumerable. The men of the west were trapped, and soon all about the grey mounds where they stood, forces 10 times and more than 10 times their match would ring them in a sea of enemies. Sauron had taken the proffered bait in jaws of steel. Little time was left to Aragorn for the ordering of his battle. Upon the one hill he stood with Gandalf, and there, fair and desperate, was raised the banner of the tree and stars. Upon the other hill hard by stood the banners of Rohan and Dol Amroth, White Horse and Silver Swan. And about each hill a ring was made, facing all ways, bristling with spear and sword. But in the front, towards Mordor, where the first bitter assault would come, there stood the sons of Elrond on the left, with the Dunedain about them, and on the right the Prince Imrahil, with the men of Dol Amroth, tall and fair, and picked men of the Tower of God. The wind blew, and the trumpets sang, and arrows whined. The sun, now climbing towards the south, was veiled in the reeks of Mordor. And through a threatening haze, it gleamed remote, a sullen red, as if it were the ending of the day, or the end, maybe, of all the world of light. And out of the gathering murk, the Nazgul came, with their cold voices crying words of death, and then all hope was quenched. Pippin had bowed, crushed with horror, when he heard Gandalf reject the terms and doom Frodo to the torment of the tower. But he had mastered himself, and now he stood beside Beregond in the front rank of Gondor with Imrahil's men. For it seemed best to him to die soon and leave the bitter story of his life, since all was in ruin. "I wish Merry was here," he heard himself saying, and quick thoughts raced through his mind, even as he watched the enemy come charging to the assault. Well, now at any rate, I understand poor Denethor a little better. We might die together, Merry and I, and since die we must, why not? Well, as he is not here, I hope you'll find an easier end. But now, I must do my best. He drew his sword and looked at it, and the intertwining shapes of red and gold and the flowing characters of Numenor glinted like fire upon the blade. This was made for just such an hour, he thought. If only I could smite that foul messenger with it, then almost I should draw level with old Merry. Well, I'll smite some of this beastly brood before the end. I wish I could see cool sunlight and green grass again. Then, even as he thought these things, the first assault crashed into them. The orcs, hindered by the mires that lay before the hills, halted and poured their arrows into the defending ranks. But through them there came striding up, roaring like beasts, a great company of hill trolls out of Gorgoroth. Taller and broader than men they were, and they were clad only in close-fitting mesh of horny scales, or maybe that was their hideous hide, but they bore round bucklers huge and black, and wielded heavy hammers in their knotted hands. Reckless, they sprang into the pools and waded across, bellowing as they came. Like a storm, they broke upon the line of the men of Gondor and beat upon helm and head and arm and shield as smiths hewing the hot, bending iron. At Pippin's side, Beregond was stunned and overborne, and he fell. And the great troll chief that smote him down bent over him, reaching out a clutching claw. For these fell creatures would bite the throats of those that they threw down. Then Pippin stabbed upwards, and the written blade of Westerness pierced through the hide and went deep into the vitals of the troll, and his black blood came gushing out. He toppled forward and came crashing down like a falling rock, burying those beneath him. Blackness and stench and crushing pain came upon Pippin, and his mind fell away into a great darkness. So it ends as I guessed it would, his thought said, even as it fluttered away, and it laughed a little within him ere it fled. Almost gay it seemed to be, casting off at last all doubt and care and fear. And then, even as it winged away into forgetfulness, it heard voices, and they seemed to be crying in some forgotten world far above. The eagles are coming! The eagles are coming! For one moment more, Pippin's thought hovered. Bilbo, it said. But no, that came in his tale long, long ago. This is my tale, and it is ended now. Goodbye. And his thought fled far away, and his eyes saw no more. Book 6. Chapter 1. The Tower of Kirith Ungol. Sam roused himself painfully from the ground. For a moment he wondered where he was, and then all the misery and despair returned to him. He was in the deep dark outside the undergate of the Orc's stronghold. Its brazen doors were shut. He must have fallen stunned when he hurled himself against them. But how long he had lain there, he did not know. Then he had been on fire, desperate and furious. Now he was shivering and cold. He crept to the doors and pressed his ears against them. Far within, he could hear faintly the voices of orcs clamoring, but soon they stopped, or passed out of hearing, and all was still. His head ached, and his eyes saw phantom lights in the darkness, but he struggled to steady himself and think. It was clear at any rate that he had no hope of getting into the Orc-hold by that gate. He might wait there for days before it was opened, and he could not wait. Time was desperately precious. He no longer had any doubt about his duty. He must rescue his master or perish in the attempt. The perishing is more likely and will be a lot easier anyway, he said grimly to himself, as he sheathed Sting and turned from the brazen doors. Slowly he groped his way back in the dark along the tunnel, not daring to use the elven light. And as he went, he tried to fit together the events since Frodo and he had left the crossroads. He wondered what the time was. Somewhere between one day and the next, he supposed. But even of the days he had quite lost count. He was in a land of darkness, where the days of the world seemed forgotten, and where all who entered were forgotten too. I wonder if they think of us at all, he said. And what is happening to them all the way there? He waved his hand vaguely in the air before him, but he was in fact now facing southwards as he came back to Shelob's tunnel, not west. Out westward in the world, it was drawing to noon upon the 14th day of March in the Shire reckoning, and even now Aragorn was leading the Black Fleet from Pelargir, and Merry was riding with the Rohirrim down the Stonewain Valley, while in Minas Tirith flames were rising, and Pippin watched the madness growing in the eyes of Denethor. Yet, amid all the cares and fear, the thoughts of their friends turned constantly to Frodo and Sam. They were not forgotten, but they were far beyond aid, and no thought could yet bring any help to Samwise Hamfast's son. He was utterly alone. He came back at last to the stone door of the Orc passage, and still unable to discover the catch or bolt that held it, he scrambled over as before and dropped softly to the ground. Then he made his way stealthily to the outlet of Shelob's tunnel, where the rags of her great web were still blowing and swaying in the cold airs, for cold they seemed to Sam after the noisome darkness behind. But the breath of them revived him. He crept cautiously out. All was ominously quiet. The light was no more than that of dusk at a dark day's end. The vast vapors that arose in Mordor and went streaming westward passed low overhead, a great welter of cloud and smoke, now lit again beneath with a sullen glow of red. Sam looked up towards the Orc Tower, and suddenly, from its narrow windows, lights stared out like small red eyes He wondered if there was some signal. His fear of the orcs, forgotten for a while in his wrath and desperation, now returned. As far as he could see, there was only one possible course for him to take. He must go on and try to find the main entrance to the dreadful tower. But his knees felt weak, and he found that he was trembling. Drawing his eyes down from the tower and the horns of the cleft before him, he forced his unwilling feet to obey him and slowly, listening with all his ears, peering into the dense shadows of the rocks beside the way, he retraced his steps, past the place where Frodo fell, and still the stench of Shelob lingered. And then on and up, until he stood again in the very cleft where he had put on the ring and seen Shagrat's company go by. There, he halted
too much.
and sat down.
Now I want to play some music.